Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cloud Sustainability FinOps versus GreenOps webinar. Thank you all for joining. I'll just wait a couple of minutes before we start to let everyone join. I think we have a pretty good list of attendees. A few reminders. We will be recording today's webinar and it will be available on demand viewing following the live event. Today's webinar will include a video presentation. You can adjust the webinar audio by using the media player, which is located to the bottom of the webinar console. If you're experiencing technical difficulties during the webcast, let us know by submitting questions through the Q&A area of your screen. We encourage you to submit your questions throughout the webcast, as we'll try and answer your questions at the end of the webinar. CP credits may be available for this webinar. We encourage you to contact your local association. So let's get kick-started with introductions. I'll just introduce myself and the team. Hello, everyone. I'm Archana. I'm the Technical Director for Cloud Consulting in Protiviti. We also have Ed Burt from Apptio, an IBM company, who's a solution architect. And we have Rich, who is our Managing Director and leads the ESG practice in Protiviti Australia. We are excited to take you all through the latest trends in cloud, why sustainability is important, and introduce you all to the practices that are to be implemented by the organizations to ensure no cloud waste, and where cloud consumptions fall under in terms of the ESG reporting and the latest regulatory requirements. Just a quick overview on the webinar and what's the learnings of this webinar. We'll touch base on why cloud sustainability is important and how FinOps can help drive the sustainability in cloud. We'll also learn about FinOps best practices at a high level and the intersections with GreenOps. We'll look into AI demand and the introduction of sustainability challenges. We'll also touch base on ESG regulatory reporting requirements. We'll cover the Australia standards as well as global. And before we start, let's go through some questions just to get an understanding of your awareness and participation in terms of all the terminologies that I went through. The first one is, what's your understanding of FinOps practices? We just want to know if you're aware of FinOps, or do you have basic understanding, or you're already using FinOps best practices in your organization and you're at an advanced level. I'll give probably 10-15 seconds before I click next to see the results. Let's look at the responses. I think we have 35% saying you're not aware of FinOps. I think we have 47% with basic understanding, which is amazing. And we have about 17% who have a good understanding of FinOps. That's good to know. The next question is, are you using a tool to effectively manage cloud costs? We just want to know if there is a tool that your organizations are using. Yes or no would be good. I'll give about 10 seconds for you all to answer. Okay, let's look at the responses. Yes, we have 35% using a tool to manage cloud costs, which is good. And 64% who are not using any tool to manage the cloud costs. Good to know. The next question, and this is the last one, is your organization tracking or reporting on sustainability, which is the ESG reporting? The first option is you're doing it partially. Second is you're exploring on how to report. Third, you have not initiated and there's no reporting that has been kicked off yet. I'll give you seconds for everybody to answer. I can see 8%, 27% answered. 43% answered. May try and give, because I think this is something that we want to definitely know on the audience understanding in terms of ESG reporting. I'll give a few more seconds. Okay. So partially 65%, that's really good. Exploring 25% and 10% non-initiated. Okay, let's get kickstarted. So let's start with what's cloud sustainability. Cloud sustainability refers to environmentally conscious practices within cloud computing to reduce the carbon footprint and promote ecological balance. Cloud sustainability promotes the use of renewable energy to reduce energy needs. All the major cloud providers are taking significant steps to convert their data centers into green cloud. What is FinOps? FinOps is a practice for cloud services where it aids and supports the cloud sustainability by optimizing resources in cloud, ensuring efficient use of resources, and reducing unnecessary consumption. FinOps drives cloud accountability. It also drives cloud cost transparency within your organizations. Whereas what's GreenOps? GreenOps focuses on implementing eco-friendly practices and strategies in operational processes within your organizations. FinOps advocates the use of renewable energy. It has really three main goals: maximizing energy efficiency, promoting recycling, and minimizing the use of hazardous materials. That's at a high level in terms of what's cloud sustainability, what's FinOps, GreenOps, and how ESG reporting falls under all of these. Now, the next slide. So in terms of where do cloud emissions fall, so before we understand what's ESG reporting, we need to also understand how cloud is related to ESG reporting. So carbon emission footprints is categorized into scope 1, 2, 3 at a high level, and scope 1 is direct emissions. That's examples are really your emissions that are from your owned and operated equipments. Scope 2 is emissions associated with the generation of electricity, heating, cooling, and scope 3 is where it falls under the indirect emissions, which is your infrastructure, which is also cloud service providers. That's where the cloud falls under. So scope 3 is where the cloud emissions fall. And as you can see on the right-hand side, scope 1 and 2 are the tip of the iceberg, really, whereas scope 3 is a significant portion of emission for your product, your services, your service delivery. Scope 3 emissions are approximately 80% of cloud providers' total emissions. And if you're to report on the ESG, unless you have the ability to accurately measure cloud sustainability, the elephant probably gets ignored. So that's where we are coming up in terms of the cloud sustainability. So cloud falls under the scope 3 of carbon emissions. So I constantly get asked on this question, is cloud not already sustainable? Because yes, that's probably cloud providers are investing heavily in new technologies, but mostly towards the power element. Example, the infrastructure, the electric supply, the data centers, the cooling, etc. So that's where they're investing heavily. Definitely they're using the latest technology, but emissions within cloud and due to the cloud consumptions are not very well tracked. They're unknown. Cloud waste equals to higher carbon emission. This is where FinOps practice is critical to drive the sustainability in cloud. Example practices are optimizing workloads, ensuring cost transparency, building sustainability into your application product design, into building sustainability into your code efficiency, server resizing, turning off the machines out of business hours when not in use. FinOps practices are key to unlocking carbon savings in cloud. This saving can actually help fund other sustainability initiatives as well and become a reason to focus on FinOps. Moving on to cloud consumption market trends and what's really happening in the market and why sustainability is even more important now. Firstly, we see many organizations are moving into multi-cloud strategies and using more than two cloud service providers for their cloud consumptions. Uh, they're increasing there's a significant increase in modernization in cloud that's resulting in the complexities to manage these workloads as well as the transition. In addition, manual tracking on cloud cost is not going to be efficient across the products, the support, the managed service providers. You have monitoring tools, observability tools, and also brokerage. So this is quite a bit in terms of financial management and reporting due to the multi-cloud consumption. Secondly, I'm sure you all are seeing the AI demand in the market over the last year, and the opportunity of these AI models being consumed through cloud is attracting many organizations. However, this comes with its own AI sustainability challenges. Everyone is trying to build and consume large AI models with billions of parameters over the internet, in fact, duplicating the data and trying to make these models more and more efficient. Just to give an example, according to the estimates, a single day of global ChatGPT usage can consume as much electricity as 33,000 US households uh, use in the same time period. So that's a significant portion. This is just one day of ChatGPT. And if Google were to replace all the user search engines interacting with Bard, it would use as much power as the entire country of Ireland. So, as the world continues to navigate the challenges of climate change, the energy efficient deployment on AI will be a crucial component in terms of ESG strategy. So, we're actually going to have much more difficulty in terms of tracking and a lot of need based on the trends in terms of cloud sustainability. Moving on to where does the intersection fall for FinOps and GreenOps? So if you can see, FinOps is mostly the economical sustainability, and GreenOps focuses on environmental sustainability. They do support each other, and the practices intersect to help drive cloud sustainability. Both disciplines emphasize cost efficiency, they emphasize resource optimization in cloud, and also add significant accountability in terms of managing the cost at an organization level. To explain cloud waste from a green ops perspective, the practice supports optimization of oversized compute, making sure there's right sizing happening, sizing of serverless functions, But not just that, but it also deep dives into your operational processes, standards, and also links into your strategy and links into your procurement processes. So GreenOps actually touches a lot of different areas, not just cloud, but across the organization. But the practice that goes directly against GreenOps probably is the concept of reserved instances, and where the organizations make huge commitments to get discounts, and so organizations end up spending every single dollar. Some of the principles of FinOps and GreenOps are responsible technology usage, workload efficiency, elastic workloads, setting carbon targets. That's where we see a interface between FinOps and GreenOps. But both FinOps and GreenOps actually contribute to ensuring a sustainable and usage of technology. So the next one, so far we understood that to ensure organizations are implementing sustainable practices, it's important to focus on scope 3 emissions as well, which are probably not visible to, and they are just underneath the iceberg. And cloud consumptions fall under the scope 3. We also learned that FinOps practice implementation is crucial to ensure effective cloud cost management. We also learned that FinOps and GreenOps intersect well and they support each other. I want to actually introduce you all and give you a glimpse of FinOps framework. This is a framework that's supported by FinOps Foundation. As you can see, the framework maximizes the business value of cloud. That's the core the core practice. It also supports the idea that everyone in the organization takes the ownership of their cloud usage. It's not just the IT or the technology team's responsibility. It provides clear view of cloud costs in your business, finance teams, and your risk teams. The capability ensures there's reporting, there's analytics, there's planning and forecasting that's in place, there's a visibility of cloud unit economics, and it also has the optimization methodologies that also fall under this framework. So that's like a one pager of FinOps framework. And again, this is by the FinOps Foundation, which is a global organization supporting and helping to enhance the FinOps practices. So how do you implement the FinOps framework in practice? So that's where I actually want to introduce one of the market leading tools to manage cloud costs. That's Apptio. It's an IBM company, and it recognizes, as Apptio has been recognized as a leader in the space by Forrester Wave. I'll actually hand over to Ed from Apptio to take us through the details. And also we'll look into the use cases of how actually organizations are using the tools to optimize the cloud costs, as well as there is a reporting element in terms of carbon footprint that we will see in terms of the use cases. With this, I'll just hand over to Ed. Thank you.
Thanks, Archana. And thanks everyone today for joining. So as mentioned, my name is Ed Burt. I am a solution consultant here at Apptio, and I've been working there for 2 years. Before that, I was a practitioner myself. So I worked very closely with my cloud team to understand the impact of cloud costs for an organization. So hopefully today I'll be able to bring with me that experience, share with you a bit of best practices around FinOps, talk to you about the FinOps maturity and the FinOps evolution as it's been adopted more and more by industry. And then finally, I'll link it back to how we are seeing FinOps play in GreenOps and in sustainability reporting. So I'm very excited to share with you guys some of the concepts that our customers, ourselves have been working together to build out so that we can get a better picture of the sustainability of a company's IT organization. So I will just start with a very quick primer on what Cloudability does. And at its core, Cloudability is aligned with the FinOps framework. So Cloudability is really a platform to use when you have to do FinOps at scale. And if you look at where we are bringing our data in from, we really start with data across all the cloud platforms. So often when organizations start out in the cloud, they might be using a single provider and they can get by with cost reporting using the native tools. Once they're starting to expand and accelerate their growth across multiple cloud, it often becomes necessary to use a single unified platform that shows all of cloud costs across one platform. We're also marrying that up with cloud usage data. So that's your actual utilization. And this is going to be key for when we're doing our GreenOps or our sustainability reporting, because our utilization data really informs how much we're actually consuming in the cloud and how we're going to start to capture those Scope 3 emission-related costs. And one thing I'll also touch on is how the cloud environment is getting a lot more complex. So what we'll find is that organizations, maybe some of you guys yourselves, are using a lot more third-party tools, things like Jira, New Relic, even Snowflake, and those obviously have a cost associated with them, as well as a sustainability factor that we need to take into account. So how do we integrate those additional costs in as well? But at its core, what Cloudability will enable you to do is to really get an understanding of the total cost of cloud, allow you to do advanced forecasting when it comes to how you plan out your cloud budget for the upcoming years, report on a lot of cloud metrics and expose them to people in your organization, and really align yourself to the 3 phases of FinOps, where we're informing our internal and external users on our cloud costs and our cloud sustainability. We're optimizing, where we're using less cloud or we're signing up to savings instruments in the cloud, and we're operating, making sure that our cloud spend acts like a business and is expressed as a business outcome. I'm going to also take the time to talk about what the cloud financial management journey looks like. So regardless of whether your organization is at the early stages of understanding FinOps, or if you're quite advanced on your path, we can always bring it back to these 3 stages. In that inform piece, it's good to just get a single pane of glass visibility where you can see all your cloud costs in a single place, and you can start to show your spend out to the relevant people, whether that's through executive dashboards, so showing your executives what you're spending in the cloud, or low-level granular detail for your engineers to go and investigate individual costs. Where we see that maturing in the organization is instead of just focusing on cloud costs, we're looking at unit economics. And unit economics is really getting an understanding of how much it costs to service one customer, or how much it costs to service one workload per workload in the cloud. We're also talking about total cost of ownership in that inform phase, and we'll touch on that in a bit. In terms of optimization, optimization is really around how do you use less of the cloud, how do you shut down idle or unused instances, how do you pick up anomalies and action them quickly, and how do you purchase saving instruments that actually provide value to your organization. When we talk about advanced optimization, we might be talking about automation, for example. So automatically rightsizing, automatically purchasing savings plans so that you can flex as you use more of the cloud or less of the cloud and still get the value of the scale there. And finally, in operate, this is where we put cloud FinOps across the entire organization and make it a business priority. So this is things like gamification, where we start to report on how much each individual team is using in the cloud, using leaderboards to show organizations which are the most effective in operating in the cloud, and doing things like collaborating and socializing plans and forecasts. So today, a lot of cloud budgeting is done out of spreadsheets. We want organizations, as they mature through FinOps, to start using standardized processes and standardized tools to support that so that they can work collaboratively there. And the last piece I'll touch on is just to make the audience here aware that cloud cost goes beyond just the 3 or 4 service providers. So whilst a lot of organizations will start by looking at their AWS, their Azure, and their cloud, Google Cloud costs, third-party tools are starting to take over some organizations' spends compared to their cloud. Archana briefly mentioned AI and data modeling. A lot of organizations are finding costs for things like Databricks or Snowflake starting to snowball as well. So how do we get that costing in front of the business and visible to everyone? And what we envision for all organizations that adopt FinOps is really this idea of the TCO, or the total cost of ownership. Now, initially, this is always referred to in just dollar costs, but as we talk more and more about sustainability, we can talk about the total cost of ownership from a sustainability lens as well. How much CO2 or CO2 equivalent is being used by Team A versus Team B to operate across the cloud, whether that's at the 3 service providers, third-party or monitoring tools, and then even capturing things like labor-related costs associated with operating in the cloud. So hopefully that's given you a very good and very quick brief look at FinOps as a standalone discipline. And remember that FinOps is divided into those 3 phases of inform, optimize, and operate. But then there are also different maturity levels as you go through that journey of FinOps. And I will say that it's an iterative process. So as the organizations start to grow and the FinOps community gets better and better at identifying cloud costs, this framework will also start to grow. But as Archana mentioned, there really is an intersection between FinOps and GreenOps. So as mentioned before, and we'll keep bringing this up, FinOps is all about economical, sustainable practices, making sure that an organization is not using more in the cloud than it needs to in order to operate efficiently. And GreenOps, being environmental sustainability, has a very similar and aligned messaging there. In fact, one of the insights that we are seeing from industry is that even though a lot of individual people working in an IT organization are tied to economic metrics, they might have KPIs given to their business that relate to, reducing the cost of cloud. Tying in GreenOps and showing people their CO2 emissions adds that social layer into what they're doing. And what we find is that once that social layer is attached to it as well, people connect to it on a personal level. People who are concerned with their carbon footprint stand up and take more notice of what they're doing in the cloud, and they're more likely to be aligned to the messaging of reducing cloud usage. So what we really want to do is put the most amount of information in front of people, both in terms of cost and the carbon footprint, so that they can make informed decisions for their business to drive down these costs. And what I want to talk to you guys about today is where we are seeing customers tackling IT sustainability. So these are real-world examples of the use cases that our customers and ourselves internally are really focusing on delivering as FinOps and GreenOps starts to take more of a center stage. So obviously, a lot of people are focusing their work currently on that understanding of carbon unit costs, being able to calculate exactly how much carbon footprint their cloud environment has, and they can get an understanding of the unit costs, whether that's down to the per terabyte of data processed or per customer served. It really has to go down to that level in order for us to understand how much or how efficiently we are using the cloud. Now, the other key thing that organizations are starting to roll out today is the other use case that has a star next to it, partnering with the business. So when we partner with the business, we put the metrics around costs and CO2 measurements in a lens that makes sense to the different stakeholders. So whether that's at an application level, whether that's at the department level, or whether that's at the different business unit levels, if we break down the information to that granular, we can use that to start a conversation with, for example, our sales team, and say that, hey, our sales team is using a lot more cloud than, for example, our marketing team. And then that message is more likely to resonate with them if we can show them what their usage is, and then they're more likely to take action to track and to reduce their carbon footprint. Now, the other 3 use cases are ones that are still developing, but they are ones that we are seeing in our customer base. Once an organization is confident around their cloud carbon footprint, they might turn towards their on-prem footprint. And that's data centers as well as end user devices. So end user devices is actually a large portion of CO2 related costings that is often too hard for most organizations to track. But Apptio and Apptio Cloudability has been tracking on-prem related spend for organizations for many years now. So we can start to bring in a look at the on-prem carbon footprint as well. Where that eventually leads to is we don't only just want to report on it, but we also want to move beyond and start to set goals. Organizations can start to set goals that the different business units will work towards in order to reducing their carbon footprint over time. And then hopefully what we'll eventually see is carbon impact reporting, where organizations are scoping out their applications or their new feature releases in terms of what CO2 equivalent measurements we think we will need in order to stand up these applications. Eventually, there'll be a reporting interface where in order to get business buy-in or business approval to go and start up these applications, they'll need to report on what we are scoping for the carbon footprint. So hopefully that's given you some ideas into some of the use cases that we're going to see in the market going forward. What I want to touch on next is how we're seeing customers react to the lack of data that might be out there. So one of the key objections that we might hear for how hard it is to start some of this carbon-based reporting is that the service providers themselves may not be providing all of the information in order to do these calculations, to run these formulas. And what we're finding organizations do is they're not waiting for the cloud service providers to provide it. They're using other data sources that might be out there and freely available. For example, like the cloud carbon footprint data set, and they're marrying up these data sets with the utilization data that they're getting out of Cloudability. So we've been able to help our customers bring in the Cloudability cost data, marry that up with other data sets, and then really build a rigorous and formulaic methodology that allows us to get a comprehensive total CO2 equivalent metric. Now, some organizations might argue that without the actual data from the cloud providers, this might not necessarily be accurate. But what we're hearing from market is that it's better to get directionally correct and to start heading in the right direction with their reporting instead of waiting for some of these cloud providers to start bringing out some of these metrics themselves. And as a result, we've been able to see customers start to build out some of these reports themselves in our Cloudability platform. So it might be a little hard to see, but this is what we would typically see as a carbon emission summary for one of our customers. And what I really want to highlight here is that the metrics in the boxes on the left are really a unit metric. So they're CO2 metrics per million terabytes, or CO2 metrics per million vCPU hours. Whilst it might be good enough to report that our CO2 has gone down for a particular month, unless we understand why that is the case, because of actually direct action by ourselves, or is it just less usage that we have for that month? We need that unit metric in order to really understand if the actions we are doing are actually impactful. And you can see here that, again, we're doing reporting, for example, kilowatts per kilowatt hours by location. So being able to break it down into more granular measurements also gives us a lot more insight here. Now, the other key thing that we're really doing, or we're really seeing customers do with us, is aligning to the business. So this is the same metrics, carbon emission summaries, but broken down into our business units, maybe our sales team, or our data department, or our marketing team. And by breaking it down into either that function, or that directorate, or that department, or even the applications that we're supporting, we're really starting to be able to have conversations with these business units at their level. So instead of a rolled up amount that executives will see and ask us to drive initiatives from top down, by showing the individual departments their actual carbon impact, they're more likely to respond and to take action for themselves. And then finally, a really interesting use case that we're seeing is that balancing act between right-sizing for the sake of cost optimization and right-sizing for the sake of CO2 emissions. Because what we're finding is that right-sizing, changing instance families might not necessarily be beneficial in both instances. Of course, the best right-sizing action is one where carbon emissions decrease and cost also decreases. But sometimes we might change to a more economical instance family that costs us slightly more. Or we might change to an instance family that costs us less because we need to reduce costs, but that comes at the price of increasing our carbon footprint. So how do we have that balancing act, and how do we report on that is also something that we're finding is very important in industry. So hopefully those insights have been useful in helping you understand the intersection between FinOps, which again is a growing discipline, and GreenOps. These examples that I've walked through today, if there's any more that you would like to see or you'd like to have that additional conversation with ourselves around this, we'll be providing these slides if you contact us, and we can have that further discussion as well. With that, I'm going to hand over to Rich to talk about the ESG related requirements.
Thanks, Ed, and it's been thank you to both Archana and Ed just to give that what I think is a really interesting perspective on how to optimize for FinOps and sustainability. I'm going to briefly just talk about the why this is important to organisations more broadly, and why this is going to be increasingly a focus if it's not already within your organisations. So most of you will be familiar with sustainability, climate change, CO2 emissions, both in APAC and globally. But here we've just got a bit of a snapshot of some of the standards that are being introduced, largely aligned to IFRS S1 and S2, which is probably the global standard at this point in time around climate emissions and sustainability reporting. And as you can see, there's a lot of activity happening, and this probably is a slide that continually evolves as new regulation comes out. And we've got some key ones across the APAC region, obviously Australia, and I'll come to that in a moment, but also South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong. Singapore's just recently released an implementation roadmap for sustainability reporting. So there's really a lot of focus, and this will only increase over the next coming years. And as part of that, as the increase in FinOps and the increase of technology compute or AI increases, that's going to become a larger part of organizations, particularly in the service sector, but also in all sectors that are using this type of technology. It's going to become an increasing focus of what is our carbon footprint from using these types of technology. A couple of other major ones which are probably leading the way, and what may or may not be applicable to organizations in APAC, but particularly if you are doing business either in Europe or in the US, these are sort of some of the standards that are coming out or have been out for a few years. So CSRD is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive out of the EU, applicable both for EU and non-EU companies where you've got a subsidiary. And it's of a certain size, but that it is a much more comprehensive regulation than elsewhere in the world. So it goes beyond just CO2 emissions. That actually applies to a range of different sustainability metrics, which aren't necessarily directly applicable here. But it also includes the concept of double materiality, which is not only the impact that climate can have on your organization, but also what your impact your organization has on climate. So it's a concept in sustainability reporting which is very prevalent in Europe. And then we've also got the SEC regulations, disclosure rules that have come out this year, which will lead any US public companies to going down a very a similar route in terms of disclosures around sustainability that they're already doing around financial metrics, which will place a lot of onus on organizations to build control frameworks, understand their data, and be able to report all that up into sensible external reporting. Both of those are being implemented over the next few years. In terms of Australia, and I'll just, given that's certainly where I'm based, Australia is looking at climate-related disclosures over the next 5 years, starting from the 1st of January 2025 and progressively being introduced across various sizes of organisation, from the largest, which will start in January next year, all the way down to smaller operations. And you can see on there, smaller operations being anything that's got over 50 million of revenue or 25 million of assets or over 100 employees. And typically that you have to meet 2 of those 3 thresholds to be included in scope. Important thing on here is ultimately by FY30, organisations will have to report on not just scope 1 and 2, but scope 3 as well, and will have to have reasonable assurance supplied on that, which means that there will be an audit of those CO2 emissions with a level of testing or rigour that is higher certainly than no assurance, but also from limited assurance, which is typically agreed upon procedures. But that will become increasingly onerous over the next 4 or 5 years for organisations to understand their CO2 emissions in all aspects of their business, and then ensure that they can capture that data, report it, and then get someone independently to verify that they've done that correctly. So that's kind of the why, and we just wanted to touch upon that at the end to just bring that all of what Archana and Ed have talked about into context. So that's all I wanted to talk about now. I will now pass back to Archana, I think, for just to perhaps go to questions and wrap up, I think.
Thanks, Rich. Thank you, Ed and Rich. I think we've covered quite a bit. Just to summarize, as regulatory reporting evolves, organizations must now prioritize and deep dive into the Scope 3 carbon emission, enhancing their understanding of cloud sustainability. We also see that implementing robust tracking mechanisms for cloud utilization and carbon footprint is going to be essential for meeting regulatory requirements and driving meaningful progress towards environmental safekeeping in the digital era. I also want to highlight that according to some of the surveys that I've read recently, by 2025, I think 50% of the CIOs and CEOs will have performance metrics tied to sustainability directly. So it's no wonder that sustainable IT strategies will be trending and are at the forefront of the minds for all the executives. That's where we conclude in terms of this webinar, and I hope you all have learned what's cloud sustainability and the best practices to manage sustainability in cloud, and also you had a high-level understanding of how the regulatory requirements are emerging. I'll just open up to any questions in terms of the webinar or any questions that we have not covered. I'll just open up to the audience. Just feel free to pop in your questions in the Q&A tab. And the first question is, how do you see policymakers influencing the adoption of GreenOps in the coming 2 to 3 years? Maybe I'll just ask Rich to probably answer this one.
Yeah, Archana, I think what I would I think, as I said, alluded to earlier, I think the focus on CO2 emissions, carbon intensity, is only going to increase from policymakers over the next 4 or 5 years, as particularly as organisations set targets and set strategy around sustainability, which goes beyond what might have happened with greenwashing and those type of things. This is actually real targets that will need to be measured and assured. There'll be an increasing focus, I think, on where those emissions are coming from. And as we've kind of alluded to already, while it's probably not front and center in the general consciousness, often people think of CO2 emissions as your aircraft or your heavy industry or your transport systems. I think there will be an increasing appreciation of the load or the impact FinOps has on CO2 emissions in many companies, and particularly with the advent of AI and blockchain and the carbon intensity of those types of technologies. I think policymakers will look to focus efforts in that space, particularly if there's some quick wins to be had around just advantage of the technology that's there.
Yeah, that explains. Thank you. Another question is, maybe this will be for Ed. How widespread is the discipline of FinOps in industry and in our APAC region?
Yes, thanks, Archana. So I think the discipline of FinOps has been around for a little while now, but it's really taken off in the last year or so. And we see that as a result of just more cost pressures. Organizations are starting to really tighten their cloud budget. And one of the things about cloud is a lot of people moved to the cloud with the promise that it would be a lot more cheaper than their data centers. And we're only now finding out that might not necessarily be the case unless we adopt really cloud native methodologies and a more rigor to our spend. So I think FinOps has been around for a while. It hasn't really been done at scale, especially in our region, until quite recently. In saying that, I think that's going to continue to be the case as more organizations are becoming more aware of their cloud costs. They'll start to create FinOps focused teams, or they'll start to adopt more processes around that. So along with GreenOps, I think it's really going to grow in the next couple of years or so.
All right, thank you. I think we have a follow-on question from the group. So I think this is particularly on the cloud service providers not offering the data or making the data available in terms of calculating CO2 emission. The question is, so on what other data sources are the companies relying upon right now?
Yep. So thank you, Jessica, for that question. Yeah, like I said, at the moment, they might not be necessarily providing full data sets around exactly what instances or what CPUs might be actually running in their cloud centers. And what we're adopting, at least in Apptio, is a data set called Cloud Carbon Footprint, or CCF. So for those who aren't aware, that is a data set that is open source. So you can look it up today and you can use it as the starting point. And a lot of organizations are using it as a starting point for their CO2 equivalent calculations. There are a couple out there that are in industry. Some of them are paid. So we haven't seen as much adoption for that at the moment. But definitely organizations are looking to supplement data, bring in from the CSPs what they can, and then do their own calculations themselves.
I'll probably also pop in a website that gives details, and I think there are quite a few suggestions in terms of how to track the global carbon footprint. This is actually organized. I mean, this is also attached to FinOps Foundation, and we have quite a few volunteers who are supporting globally in terms of developing the recommendations on how to do these calculations and how to report back. So I'm not sure if did that come up, but I just posted this on as a response. Yeah, I think it just came through now. That's the link that you all can use. Any other questions? Okay, great. If no further questions, thank you everyone for listening and joining the webinar. And please reach out to us if you have any questions. We'll also distribute the pack that we have presented today, and we'll add some of the resources that you can refer to in terms of learning more about cloud sustainability, FinOps practices, and GreenOps practices. We'll add the links to the Apptio tool and how Cloudability and Apptio One are helping organizations to achieve their cloud costs and sustainability goals. Thank you all for joining.